Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight for our September episode of Celebrating the Art and Culture of Kentucky. Some of the Bluegrass is Black. My name is Emily Moses, and I'm the Executive Staff Advisor for the Kentucky Arts Council. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the fourth installment of this series that celebrates Black and African American artists who live in or are from Kentucky and make artwork across the disciplines and in a vast array of forms that relates to the lands we inhabit, those we call home, the Commonwealth of Kentucky. This series is one of several initiatives supported through a grant from the Emily Hall Tremaine Foundation to enhance and increase the state arts agency's work toward racial and cultural equity in the arts sector in Kentucky. I want to note throughout tonight's program, we invite you to use the chat to join the conversation and ask questions. You also can submit questions through the Q&A feature in Zoom. Additionally, if you are watching our live stream on Facebook, you can submit questions there that will be sent over to us to share with our panelists. Tonight's presentation is also being closed captioned on Zoom. It is always my pleasure to welcome our series host of Celebrating the Art and Culture of Kentucky, Some of the Bluegrass is Black, Lexington-based poet, scholar, and professor, Dr. Shauna M. Morgan, an expert in the field of Africana literature and culture. My personal thanks to Dr. Morgan for helping to develop these programs and for leading us through this series of in-depth, intimate, and thought-provoking conversations. I invite you to join the Kentucky Arts Council and Dr. Morgan each month through November as we together celebrate and elevate Black artists living and working in Kentucky. And I'll turn it over to you now, Shauna.
Thank you so much, Emily. Good evening, friends, family members. Thank you for joining us for the fourth conversation in the series, celebrating the art and culture of Kentucky. Some of the Bluegrass is Black. I'm joining you from Lexington, which is located on the original homeland of diverse Native peoples, such as the Shawnee, the Cherokee, the Chickasaw, the Osage, who arrived over 10,000 years ago. The most recent among them were the Shawnee. Today, Kentucky is still home to over 25,000 Native people representing scores of tribal groups. We must recognize the violence, including the deliberate and systematic destruction and ongoing colonialism endured by these indigenous communities. This acknowledgement is but one step, however, so I would invite you to visit and support the Coalition to Stop Violence Against Native Women and any other organizations to support this effort. I also greet you in honor of the enslaved who lived in this very place where I now sit in the East End of Lexington, Kentucky. And I bring greetings in memory of my own enslaved ancestors, likely Akan and Igbo people on the island of Jamaica. This honoring of our ancestors is particularly moving for me today as I welcome our guest, Hannah Drake, whose unknown project both creates artistic spaces and experiences to support learning, healing, reflection, reconciliation, and action by telling the stories, both known and unknown, of Black men, women, and children who were enslaved and hidden figures. You can support the Unknown Project here. I will drop a link in the chat for everyone, and this will also be available on our stream. Hannah L. Drake is a blogger. First, I just want to take a moment before I introduce Hannah, just to lift up the name of young Tyree Smith as we mourn with our Louisville family and friends and neighbors. Thank you, Hannah, for being here. Hannah L. Drake is a blogger, activist, public speaker, poet, and author of 11 books. She writes commentary on politics, feminism, and race, and her work has been featured online at Cosmopolitan, The Bitter Southerner, Harper's Bazaar, and Revolt TV. In 2019, during Super Bowl Sunday, Hannah's poem, All You Had to Do Was Play the Game Boy, which addresses the protest by Colin Kaepernick, was shared by film writer, producer, and director Ava DuVernay, and then shared by Kaepernick himself. The poem has been viewed more than 2 million times. Hannah's commentary on life and challenging others to dream bigger have been recognized by First Lady Michelle Obama. She was featured on the Tom Joyner Morning Show with Jackie Reed, to discuss her international movement, Do Not Move Off the Sidewalk, which is dear and near to my heart, which addresses the power of holding your space. Hannah was selected by the Muhammad Ali Center to be a Daughter of Greatness, which features prominent women engaged in social philanthropy, activism, and pursuits of justice. She was also selected as one of the best of Louisville, Kentucky, for her poem Spaces, and recently was honored as a Kentucky Colonel, the highest title of honor bestowed by the Kentucky governor, recognizing an individual's noteworthy accomplishments and outstanding service to community, state, and nation. Labeled as a change agent, Hannah's message is thought-provoking and at times challenging. But Hannah believes that it is in the uncomfortable spaces that change can take place. She has said, quote, "My sole purpose in writing and speaking is not that I entertain you. I am trying to shake a nation." Welcome, Hannah. Thank you so much for being with us this evening.
Thank you for having me.
We're going to go ahead and begin with a clip of Formation to sort of introduce or reintroduce our audience to your work.
Formation. Said firmly with no hesitation. Concern for your tears. Recently went on vacation. We are unbothered by your hate and your condemnation. It is simply confirmation and the very reason we're celebrating. This is the manifestation of a bloodline that birthed a nation. We ain't offspring, we're the foundation of creation. When you sip from Mother Earth, you're drinking our libations. This is lyrical liberation. You want to be mad at something? Be mad at the blood on the hands of this nation. This is the reincarnation of a spirit that has no expiration. This is old Negro spiritual salvation. That down South church fan waving congregation. This is B's black fist standing on Rock Nation. But since you seem to need some clarification, this is for 40 acres and a mule reparations. For picking cotton in fields with no compensation. For not telling slaves about emancipation. For Rosa being told to get in the back of your transportation. For Sarah Bartman's humiliation at the hands of your exploitation. This is for co-opting a cultural weak imitations. For Martin and Medgar's assassinations. For countless years of segregation. For every time you told our sisters and brothers to assume the formation. For keeping them locked in a system changed to probation. For a racist system masquerading as fair administration. This is for Sandra Bland dead on the floor of a police station. For smallpox infestation. This is for Tuskegee experimentation. For telling us why all lives matter with no qualifications. This is for brutally raping a nation. For Eric Garner and George Floyd's suffocation. This is for Breonna Taylor's assassination. This is for a black male shot dead at Fruitville Station. And this voice is the reincarnation of everyone you murdered with no justification. Now you bow down and simply assume the formation.
Thank you for that. You know, I've seen and heard other recordings of Formation, but I was so struck by this one, by the energy and spirit of the crowd and the way that every word, just every moment, right? And that anaphora, that repetition, that sound, right? And there's this call and response that's happening. You know, we felt what that poem did for us in the height of those protests and the calls for action after Breonna Taylor was murdered. Can you just tell us a little bit about the poem in that moment, the poem and that moment, and maybe even the evolution of that particular work?
That poem in particular, and I have been writing quite a while, and I saw Beyonce perform at the Super Bowl. And the next day, everyone was stunned because they had not seen Beyonce in this way, right? Like, people forgot that Beyonce is a Black woman, right? And it doesn't matter how much money Beyonce has or how much fame she has, who she's married to, she's Black in America, right? And she faced some backlash after that. And The poem, it just dropped in my head, every single word. I knew exactly every single word. I knew it. I think I was just meant to write that particular poem. And on that day, that was the day, the clip you showed was the day they had signed Breonna's law into effect in Louisville. And so they came out to tell us that indeed Breonna's law did pass, banning no-knock warrants in Louisville, Kentucky, which is what's our first thought when we heard about Breonna Taylor was the warrant. Who signed the warrant? How did they get the warrant to enter her home? So that was always our focus, was the warrant. And what people need to realize, this may be off topic, but when Black people rise, everybody rises. And getting Breonna's law passed was not so that the police could not enter Black people's homes illegally. It was so the police will not enter anybody's home, and so that there will not be another Breonna Taylor in this city. And thankfully, I believe they got some version of it passed for Kentucky, so we don't have to go through that again. So it was an emotional day, very emotional day, but it was just small. You hate to call them wins during that time of protest, because every day was just a fight. But that day was a win.
And that's one of the things I appreciated about that moment too, is that even though that day was a win, but that performance and that crowd and that group of people it wasn't celebratory, it was indicting. And it was still this call for, this is not enough, we are not done yet.
Yeah.
It was the spirit of that moment, what I appreciated so much about that moment. And it's times like that when I get to know Kentucky and Kentuckians and what this space is about. I'm a fairly new resident of the Commonwealth, and I'm always interested in hearing about how other Black women from all walks of life navigate life in this space. Can you tell us a little bit about your relationship to Kentucky? When did it become home, and in what ways has it shaped you?
So my dad is born and raised in Kentucky. He's passed away now, but he's born and raised here and lived in Smoketown in Louisville, which is a neighborhood that was, it's the oldest continuous, for now, it's being gentrified, but continuous African-American neighborhood in Louisville, and that's where he was born. And my mom moved to Kentucky when she was 12. And, but they, so my sister and brother, my older sister and brother are from here, and they moved to Colorado and had me. And I came back to Kentucky, I believe I was 23 years old. And so I've been here since that time. And at the time, I didn't know if I was going to stay here or not. But, Kentucky just welcomed me with open arms. It really did. I think Kentucky certainly helped shape who I am today.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. Now you've authored 11 books, poetry, fiction, nonfiction. I do want to talk about your latest work for sure, but I'm interested in hearing about your publishing journey and your decision to be an independent author, and how it's, if it's been empowering, challenging. What has that experience been like for you?
I think it was very empowering, of course, to you, and I'm sure most artists, you have a thought in your head and then you actually get to see it and hold it and feel it,
Yes.
And so to see my book, my first book, but it never gets old. I could write 100 books and I would feel that way. It was just very rewarding and well received. That's one thing about Kentucky, is always supported any work that I've done, always has. And so just recently, and I self-publish all my books, but recently I'm in talks with an agent to not self-publish. They would publish the book, and we'll see how that goes. And a book about this process of the Unknown Project and protesting, and just I guess being a Black woman in Kentucky. So, and it has its challenges. It's not easy. It's not easy. Yeah.
Yeah, there's an interesting sort of, that freedom you have to render the art in the ways that you want, that you determine, sometimes are challenged when there are other people in the picture, right?
Yeah.
Maintaining and being firm about your art, is critical, and particularly for Black women,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
in every industry. So tell us a little bit about your new book, Dear White Women. It's me. I'm breaking up with you. What was the catalyst for this work?
I think over the course of maybe now it's last 5 years, certainly, the election triggered that conversation. And I would blog, and my blog, it's just free and out to the world. And millions of people have read my blog. And still it seemed every day we were in this awkward dance, Black women and white women, and we were not catching our rhythm at all. And so I needed, I knew the title would catch people, but I wanted white women to understand if we're going to stand together, then I really need you to stand with me. Not when it's convenient, not when there's cameras there, not because you need a Black friend to invite to the one thing and then my face is there, but I really need you to stand with me, because Black women, especially when we saw everything that happened last year, but certainly before this, are like fighting for our lives. And yes. Black women are often tasked, and that's my shirt says "Fix It, Black Girls." And I wrote a poem entitled that. That Black women are often asked to fix it and clean it up and make it better, and we'll tear it down and you rebuild it, and we'll mess it up and you clean it up. And I was tired of that. I was tired of this awkward dance. And the book was very well received. And so many women would email me and say, "Are you really breaking up with us, Hannah?" And I told them, "No, I'm not breaking up with you, but I really need you to focus and really stand with Black women who are often," my friend said, "Black women are often the feet and never the face of anything." And yes. We're often in the background doing the work and not rewarded for the work. And yeah.
That's right. And if we are to tear down this white supremacist heteropatriarchy, then those white women who are accomplices in that effort need not step away to benefit from the patriarchy sometimes and then come back, right?
Right.
All in.
Yeah, you got to be all in. And that's the part that's difficult, because I think many Black women and women of color want to believe that we are women and we're going to stand on this thing together. And then you learn that that's certainly not the case. And in that book, in one of those articles, I said it's not that white women just supported white supremacy. They are co-conspirators, right? They are working together with white men in order for these things to continue to happen. So they're not just like innocent in the stuff that's happening. They are co-conspiring with white men to have some of the outcomes that we have. Yeah,
absolutely. It reminds me of when Audre Lorde's "The Master's Tools Will Never Dismantle the Master's House." She was indicting white women in that.
Yeah.
Right, in much the same way. In fact, the entire corpus of your work calls to mind, for me, what Audre Lorde wrote in that essay, "The Transformation of Silence into Language and Action," where she talks about the ways that we are visible in our Blackness, and the ways she talks about how vulnerable we are and the visibility of that, and how I'll just quote. She said, quote, "For to survive in the mouth of this dragon we call America, we have had to learn this first and most vital lesson, that we were never meant to survive. And that visibility, which makes us most vulnerable," that she's talking about our Blackness and Black women, And that visibility, which makes us most vulnerable, is that which is also the source of our greatest strength.
Mm-hmm.
You know, to say that your work is bold, I think would be reductive, because it's more than that. It gathers up all these parts of our lives that Audre Lorde was talking about, particularly Black women, right? And it speaks their whole truths. And I'm interested in how you navigate that visibility and vulnerability in your life and in your work. What steadies you?
Sometimes that's difficult, especially last year when it seemed like we were protesting every day and I was writing all the time, not taking time off, certainly didn't have time to take care of myself at all. And I'm one day I'm gonna write, I keep saying I'm gonna write about this, but what many people don't understand is, and I know no other way than to be honest, that's just who I am, is that activism will cost you. There's a cost to this. And people see like, oh, and Hannah was, retweeted by this person or in a magazine or wrote this thing, but it costs you something, right?
Yes.
And people need to know that. And I had to make a decision, so I'll be like on sabbatical soon, to step away. That sometimes you do have to step away. You're not going to save the world in a day. It's going to be okay if you take some time to step away. However, even in saying that, when I started my blog, I just drew a line in the sand. I knew it was going to be controversial. I knew people weren't going to like it. People send me hateful emails daily, but I had drawn a line in the sand. Enough is enough. Enough is enough. We literally just watched George Floyd die on social media.
Mm-hmm.
And people were astounded by that. But if they would just roll their minds back
Yes.
to watching Philando Castile die on
Yes.
social media, to watching Alton Sterling die on social media. So this was not like the first time we had witnessed someone dying on social media at the hands of the police. And we think about the women who are often left out of this conversation.
Yes.
And I just thought, I cannot sit here and just be silent. I'm going to write about this. I'm going to be bold about this. And I'm really going to try to focus to try to change minds. I'm literally writing to try to change the very way you think. Yes. Which is difficult. And I understand it, because most people, when they read my work, their first thing is not me. It's not me. It's not my family. My family didn't own slaves. Not me. My friends, cousins, brothers married to somebody Black. Not my family. And in fact, it is you.
Yes.
And you need to examine you. And I understand that doesn't feel good, right? Doesn't feel good to think, I might hold this belief about that, or I never really thought to examine that, or, I didn't speak up. Why didn't I speak up when something racist was said or whatever? Mm-hmm. And doesn't feel good. And I tell white people all the time, who said it was going to feel good? Like, who promised you that?
Right.
Who told you that confronting this stuff was going to feel good? I can promise you it's not going to feel good, because no one going inwardly and seeing things about you doesn't feel good.
Right.
You still have to face them. It's like your medicine. Some medicine is just nasty. And you still got to take it.
That's right.
It's not going to taste good going down, but it will be good for you. And so I tell people, my work is like some medicine. It's not going to taste good. It's not going to feel good, but it will be good for you. And I always challenge white people, just get on the other side of that discomfort. And that's when you change. But you never change. You say, well, it doesn't feel good, so I quit. I mean, it's like working out. It doesn't feel good.
Right.
You don't do it all the way. You first start, doesn't feel good. Your body's sore. It doesn't feel. But if you just keep doing it, something else is on the other side of that.
Right.
And that's how my work is. Yeah.
Right. A possibility of something different and better. And just to call back your earlier point, the recognition that, these things, these efforts, whether it is a policy and a law change or something that's that's interpersonal or introspective, right, will be beneficial. Folks don't, when we talk about this history of civil rights, oftentimes what's left out of the narrative is that it wasn't just Black folk who benefited from that. So to call to your earlier point, absolutely, absolutely. Your work is making this broad impact, and enacting and bringing about these changes and that reckoning, right, that is needed to deal with some of these things. And my family and I recently spent time at the Unknown Project's first installation on the Banks of Freedom. Powerful.
Thank you.
For folks who haven't been there, I want to share a short clip of the Juneteenth celebration there this summer, which is beautiful. I think we have some time for that clip. But just a really powerful and moving space. And I'm going to ask
you
to pull that up for us.
Unknown Project is an artist-led effort created to acknowledge the names and tell the stories of known and unknown Black people who were enslaved and hidden figures in Louisville, Kentucky, and the surrounding region. On Juneteenth, 2021, hundreds of community members came together for the unveiling of On the Banks of Freedom, the first Unknown Project public art installation created with artists William M. Duffy and Dave Caudell overlooking the Ohio River.
I have been envisioning this for years because I just couldn't, it didn't sit right with me that somebody could be in the world and be labeled as unknown. And at some point, they had a name. Their parents gave them a name, and their name was stolen from them. And this was just our way of exhuming their bodies and their stories and telling the people their names.
The program included Unknown Project partners Idols X Lab and lead artists Hannah Drake and Josh Miller, Fraser History Museum, and Roots 101 African American Museum. The program also included community members Elmer Lucille Allen and Ed Hamilton, along with Louisville Metro, who accepted the installation as a gift to the city of Louisville.
One of the things that has been such a surprise from the process is how much we really didn't even know and how much immediately started coming out. She mentioned the people that reached out with names. We had someone come forward with a will and photos and a ledger that was on a family bookcase with 50 names and birth dates. And it's telling a different, more full story, and that's what the project is for.
All I ever want to do is tell our story 365 days a year. Our children deserve that. Tell the story that they're descendants of kings and queens that were enslaved in America. Tell them that they're more than what America's telling them on a daily basis. It's an honor to be here. 62-year-old, born and raised in Louisville, Kentucky. And I sit here and see my name on this bench. Nothing but God.
A lot of people told us, a lot of funders, that this project was too big. But if you're going to dream, why not dream big? Our ancestors here had to escape across that river. They did the impossible. Because I want y'all to know some of our people made it. Some of our people made it across that river. Some of our people made it to freedom. Don't you tell me what's too big for me. I stand on the shoulders of everybody on these benches. Don't you tell me what's too ambitious. You ain't met Hannah Drake. You ain't met Josh Miller. Don't tell me what's too ambitious.
The Unknown Project and installation have been made possible by the National Endowment for the Arts, the Ford Foundation, the Al-Hapa Foundation, Brown-Forman, Republic Bank, LG&E, and individual donors. During the unveiling, Hannah and Josh announced that the Mellon Foundation had made a $300,000 investment into the Unknown Project.
Ooh. Yes, they don't know Hannah Drake. Love it. I was when I saw that, I said, "Oh my Lord, I must have been out of town visiting my mama." Miss that beautiful sea of folks and just
Yeah.
all the things. I mean, just look, just so wonderful in that space. It's just it's a sacred space.
Yes.
And I mentioned to you before, it called to mind Morrison's Beloved. There's a scene where Stampede, ferries folks across the Ohio. And this, we're so happy about the success and not just the success, but the fact that there is this space.
Yes.
The New York Times article, Maggie Jones said, of the poem that's there. It is a poem about slavery, of course, but it carries echoes of Breonna Taylor and #SayHerName and the efforts to push injustices into the light. And as much as Drake's work is about the dark past, she is interested in the light that reveals hidden stories and creates a way forward. And I was so struck by what you said about exhuming the body and the story. Even now, as I'm just repeating it, the imagery of it is so powerful. And I kept on thinking about that when I was there, the imagery of that phrase. And I'm just wondering, how do you continue, for yourself beyond sort of the call to have people bring materials? How do you continue to seek those stories? Do you return to that space on the river?
I go to that space on the river often. And I had, before that space was created, I was doing some work with a group of girls in Mississippi, in Natchez, Mississippi. And so I started visiting plantations while I was there. And you have seen plantations on TV or like in the movies and read about things, and then to see it was shocking to me. And many of them are still intact. And so I thought, because I had no clue, I thought, oh, well, it's like part of history and you just go and you can go see. And the tour guide said, oh, no, Hannah. He said, they still live in those homes. They have simply just passed the homes down to their families. But some of them are open for people to come tour, and they still have the furnishing, and the dining table was set with all the china, and there was a casserole dish, and the knob on the casserole dish was shaped like a cotton ball, and it was solid gold. So they still have all the stuff, right? The beds, the curtains, all the things. And above this table, I'll never forget this, above this table was a big fan. I didn't know what this was. And there was a string attached to it, and it went to the corner. And so the tour guide told me it was a punka. And he said, an enslaved child, typically a girl, would have to stand in the corner and pull this string, and the fan would wave back and forth over the table to keep flies off food. And I was so disturbed that somebody was enslaved to keep flies off food. And I remember that he told me, and he was a Black tour guide. They only had 2 Black tour guides, and he was one of the 2 I was talking to. He said, don't cry for her because she had a very important job. He said, when people eat, they talk. And her job was to stand in that corner and listen to everything that was said around that table and go back and tell her mother, in the hopes that perhaps something was said where they would be able to escape. And I never forgot this phrase, go back and tell, that he told me, that I knew my job, and this was even before the Unknown Project was even a thought, was to go back and tell the story. And there were so many stories that are just lost. They're just lost. And I start talking to my mom, and we were talking about me going to Senegal, and I stood in the door of no return and talking about Mississippi. And she says to me, and my mom will be 71 October 11th. And she said, well, Hannah, you know, when I was a little girl, I used to pick cotton. And I said, what are you talking about? I had never heard my mom tell me this story. I said, what are you talking about? And she said, when I was 9, my grandmother would come get us, her and her brothers and sisters, and we'd get on a bus and we would go pick cotton for 80 cents a day. And I was stunned. One, that my mom had never told me this story, but and she did this for 3 years, she said, until she moved to Louisville. And that so 3 years of her life was tied up in these cotton fields. And so I asked her, well, what was your grandmother's name? And all my grandparents are deceased. So I said, well, what was your grandmother's name? And she said, I don't remember. She said, we used to just call her Mamie. And I said, do you remember anybody else besides your grandmother? And she said, no, I don't. And so after, which would be my great grandmother, who of course I never met, my family history is just gone. It's just unknown, right? And so I started asking more of Black people, how many generations can you go back? And often it's not far. And those stories are just erased, but we didn't just form out of the ground. We are here somehow. And so when I visited, and this gets to the Unknown Project, when I visited the National Memorial for Peace and Justice, also known as the Lynching Museum, and for your state to be listed in this museum, you had to lynch over 100 people. And Kentucky is in this museum. Kentucky, I believe, lynched 168 people, I believe. And but on these pillars, sometimes I would see the word unknown. And I was so bothered by that this person breathed and existed. They may have had children. And now they're just recorded in history as unknown. And that bothered me so badly. And that's how the project started, was how can we create a space, one, to honor those whose names we simply aren't going to know. But I know that people exist in this country that have names. Yes. And they started coming forth and saying, and that's the beauty of it, that they didn't stop because they weren't comfortable and they were ashamed. They got on the other side and said, indeed, my family did enslave people, and here are their names. And so all of those names came to us that way. And there is a woman whose name I really wanted on that platform. Her name is Eve, and she is on the platform. And a woman sent us a will, and it was her great uncle or something or other. And she said her family tells us like elaborate story that he enslaved Eve and they fell in love and had children. And she's like, come on. She said, my family needs to stop telling that story. She said, I know that it's not going to work. She said, this is a lie. And she gave me the will. She said, this is the will. And the woman's name was Eve. And she did have 3 children by this man. And on his deathbed, he freed her on his deathbed. And I was just determined that her name would be there. So this woman, Eve, this unknown person whose story was just not told, her name is now etched into history. Mm-hmm. And we can say, Eve didn't fall in love with her slave man. And stop. Eve was assaulted by this man and bore 3 children. Mm-hmm. And for all we know, as many Black women do, Eve did what she had to do, right, in order to survive and in order for her children to survive. And so now her name is part of history. Mm-hmm. And so, and that's what I wanted for people to do, and to tell the stories. And what I tell people is, look, it's 2021. No one thinks you own slaves. So there's no shame in that. The shame is in knowing and not telling. Sharing. Absolutely. Yeah. So if you have the name, and here's the thing, they're not your names. So release them. Mm-hmm. At least give them back.
Yes.
Let them be
Yes.
free.
Yes. Yes.
So in a way, if you're holding on to them, you're still enslaving those people.
Mhm.
They have the right for their names to be a part of history. Yeah.
There's something that's so powerful about hearing a name and a story, right? Even if it's not my direct enslaved ancestor, it is still a part of my story.
Yes.
And there's
Yeah.
something just deeply restorative about that, right? In the way that, we might take a DNA test and find out, oh, well, maybe we were from this part of Ghana, or maybe we were, Wolof or what have you.
Right.
In much the same way, all of these narratives that come to us become a part of our story, become
Yes.
of our collective, collective history. And so there's something, again, just that's so restorative about that, because it is as if there's a possibility that I'm hearing my own mama's great grandma
Right.
experience.
Yeah.
And that's beautiful. I'm so struck when you said you stood in the door of no return in Senegal. I haven't been to Senegal, but I stood in the door of no return in Ghana, and you look out onto the ocean, this body of water and this space that millions and millions of people walk through, right? And it's just, when I was standing on the banks of freedom and my 3-year-old was running around and stepping in all the footprint, there's something just deeply spiritual about standing in the space, right? And one of the things that I just appreciate so much about that space for us, and having that sacred space in addition to all of the narratives that we have now and the ones that are yet to come, for sure. So I'm really interested. I want to just jump back a little bit. In 2018, you published Dear America, I'm Still Rooting for You.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking about sort of what happened in that space since 2018 and now, and just all of the heartache and trauma, right, that our communities have endured. And I'm wondering, how have your feelings and ideas about that changed, if at all, or what's your perspective on that still?
I still believe in the goodness of humans. I believe in the goodness of people. I certainly doing this work, and you see so much, and it's very easy, and sometimes rightly so, to be bitter or angry or whatever. And I've been angry many times. But I will say, here protesting, I saw people protesting that I never imagined would be protesting. And my friend Cassa Heron, charted out all the towns and cities in Kentucky that, and I'm gonna, because everybody has bias and judgment, so I'm gonna call my own self out, that I thought these people are marching for Breonna Taylor. And I never imagined it. I never imagined in these small towns that there would be groups of people saying something is wrong here.
Yes.
And that's what I believe in. The goodness of people to come together, the goodness of people to sit down and have a conversation. And it's so simple. But if more people did that, the world would completely change. Because you have preconceived notions about people and you never have a conversation with them. And so it ends there. There's no growth. So like in my writing, I have many people will email me and say, I never thought about that, or you made me think about this differently. And some people say, I was really offended. You really made me upset, but I worked through that. And I tell people all the time, my writing is just a doorway. One, it's a mirror. I'm gonna hold it up. You're gonna see you. And then it's this doorway for us to have this conversation. That's what we need to have. And so America has its many challenges, but I'm going to keep rooting for America. I'm going to continue to believe in the people to make a difference. I believe in people. I believe in the goodness of people. And the people, if we want this state and this nation to change, it's the people that do it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm so glad you said that, because I was really interested in the idea of America and what you meant by that, right? Because America is a lot of things, right? but the people, right, who live and occupy the space, right?
Yeah.
Humans who can be human in
Yeah.
possible ways. Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. And I'm I love what you're saying about your writing and what you wanted to do. Now you've had, so many different collaborations. You've, collaborated with the Louisville Ballet, Actors Theater. I mean, the National Academy of Medicine has spaces, imprinted. In fact, Maggie Jones said, "You are imprinted on this," right? I guess I'm just wondering what other big dreams or possibilities are around the bend for you?
I think my biggest dream right now is I want to see the Unknown Project all over this nation. I want there to be space. This story, and when we talk about the Unknown Project, it's not Kentucky's story. This is the story of America. We could have an Unknown Project probably in every city, but certainly in many, 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 many states. Black people were everywhere and enslaved almost everywhere. And I feel, so if people listen to my poem spaces, and I feel that Black people need a space to just sit and reflect and honor and say, thank you. I have to remember that some people made it to the other side of that river. And thank you for fighting. Thank you for, dealing with things that many of us can't even imagine. We needed that space, and I had not seen that space here, right? And this is the thing, if you don't see the space, create it.
Yes.
Create it. And people, okay, so here they took down a Castleman statue. They took it down, and I felt so compelled to go stand in that space and recite my poem spaces. So I did. And people start coming out of their house, and they were walking, their dogs or strollers, and they stopped and started coming around listening. And I said, the way you all feel right now is the way this space can feel all the time.
Yes.
Because you curate the space. You do that as people. And so you get to decide, do we create something in this space that invites people in? Or do we put something in the space that keeps people out?
Yes, yes, absolutely. And it so much connects with, that do not move off the sidewalk, which I absolutely love, love, love. When I met my spouse years and years ago, he said, "Oh, you go bowling when you walk on the sidewalk." I won't away. Take up space, right? And have, yes, curating the space. And it requires all of us, not just straight, right? It requires all of us to do that. So we have about 10 or so minutes left, and I want to leave some time for folks to ask questions. But I want to ask you, what do you hope will be the lasting impacts of your art and activism?
I hope certainly that people will say Hannah made us think, reflect, and then do something. I tell people all the time, look, and I garden. And so my brother-in-law tills my little garden, and then I plant the seeds, right? And then sometimes if I'm out of town, my daughter might water it, right? And so I tell people all the time, just keep planting seeds. You may never see the harvest.
Right.
You may not till the ground. Everybody has a part. Right. And somebody may enjoy what you are doing, and you're long off this earth. It may be 20, 30, 40 years from now. But the benefit of the seed that you planted today someone will enjoy, someone will reap that. And so my job is to plant seeds. Yeah, I want to plant seeds in people. And I really am overjoyed when someone emails or calls or whatever and says, you changed my mind. And that's what I'm really trying to do, is change the very way you think. Why? Not for my benefit, for the benefit of all of humanity.
Yes.
When you see people, when you see the other person, meaning I honor you, I respect you, I see you, that's how the world changes. When you see people, you don't put kids in cages.
That's
When
right.
you see people, you're not calling them the N-word. When you really see people, you're not bashing someone because they're LGBTQ.
That's right.
You know, so I want people just to see people. And when you really see someone's humanity, you don't enslave people. And so a lot of in this country, we're not seeing people. They're just, you know, a thing, and get out my way, and I don't have to see you, so you're a kid and I can put you in a cage and it's all right, but you wouldn't do it to your kids because you see them,
Right.
you know. And so
Right.
that's what I want people to take from my work: see other people and then do something. There's
Yes.
always something to do. I say, even when Martin Luther King was marching, somebody was frying the chicken. I mean, it's always something to
That's
do.
right. That's right. Exactly. That's right. Thank you so much for being with us today,
Thank you.
sharing this time, and for being so generous with your time. We appreciate it, and we need this work that you are doing. So thank you
so much.
We have about 6 or 7 minutes, and so I see a few questions coming in already. So I will check in here. Well, first of all, there is a message from Miss.
I don't know if you froze, but I do see the message from Elmer Lucille Allen, who I absolutely love. I love you, Miss Elmer Lucille. And for anyone who doesn't know, Miss Elmer Lucille's footprints are sandblasted into the platform for the Unknown Project. We certainly wanted to highlight Miss Elmer Lucille as just this hidden, not really so much so a hidden figure anymore. She has murals and all the things, and but just for her work at Brown-Forman that she did in a time that not just Black women, but Black people, period, weren't in those spaces. And so we certainly wanted to honor her for that. So thank you, Miss Elmer Lucille.
Hannah, I'll jump in here while we're waiting for Shauna to come back in, because one of the questions that was in the chat was my own. So I'll just ask you. I wondered, at what point in your life, was it when you were a child, a teenager, young adult? What point did you feel that call to action and to write and to think and to speak and realize that you could affect change with your words?
You know, I think I was just always that way. I always hated to see people taken advantage of, and I was always rooting for the underdog because I was often the underdog just in the world and life. And I something doesn't sit right with me when there's an injustice. I feel that I have to say something about it. You know, I'm always meddling in somebody's business. But if I see something, then I feel like I have to say something. And I started reading when I was 3. And I just loved reading and loved writing. And for some reason, I don't know why, but I could see words in my head like a puzzle. I knew exactly where they were supposed to go. I think it's surely what I know I was put on this earth to do. Yeah.
Thank you for that. And Shauna has rejoined us. We're sorry for whatever happened there. Shauna, I'll turn it back over to you. I just so you know, I asked Hannah my question I had put into the chat. And there's another one in there. I don't know if you can see it though. Or not. Okay, let me just go ahead then and I'll ask this and then
Thought y'all was
pop
tired of
back in.
hearing my voice.
We had somebody who said, thank you to Hannah. It's amazing to hear her talk and learn more about the Unknown Project in Louisville. And then there was a follow-up question, and this is a great question. What do you do to rest and reset, Hannah?
I'm actually going out of town soon to a retreat center to rest and reset because I've not done that well. And I wouldn't advise anyone to do that at all. I just wrote an article called How Are You? No, really, how are you? Right. And so people will ask all the time, and I do it, we all do it. How are you? And then someone else, I'm fine. And they're really not fine. Like we're in a whole pandemic, a life has changed drastically for many of us. And I don't think America, I'm just going to talk about America because we're here, did a good job of pausing for a minute and seeing what this moment was teaching us in this pandemic. It was like, so I read, when you hit a pothole, you get out and check out the damage, right? You don't keep driving, or you're just going to make the car worse. And I believe it was like, okay, pandemic, let's all get on Zoom next week, and now we see hundreds of thousands of people have died and children are dying and the world just keeps right on going. And we have not taken the time to just pause and say, wait a minute. Something is happening, and not just with the pandemic. When we think about race in America, when we think about what happened January 6th, and just pause and say, wait a minute, something is happening in this country that we need to get a handle on, or we are going to be in some very bad trouble here. And I don't think we've done that well. I've not done it well personally, and as a nation, I don't think we've done it well to just pause for a minute. And it's going to be okay. It will be okay. Just pause. In your life, pause for a minute. It's going to be okay. Take the time to rest. Take the time to reset, because you owe that to yourself. And if we're going to do this work, we have to do that first, so then we can help other people.
Absolutely. And that in itself is a revolutionary act. Thank you so much. I think that is a beautiful, beautiful note to end on, and such a smart and powerful word. And we just thank you so much for your time again, and for all that you give to our community and beyond. And we look forward to seeing the Unknown Project all over.
Yes.
And look forward to seeing what comes out after your rest. Thank you so much, Hannah.
Thank you.
Our audience. Have a good night, everyone.